to Small Beans Program's Directorpiece Theater. I overheard them talking about this theory, and I have to tell you that I feel seen.
Ooh, yes, what he said. Welcome to Directorpiece Theater. This is the show where directors talk about directing stuff. And, I don't know. Fucking A. I'm Abe Epperson. I'm one of the directors. Who am I joined by? My co-host. What's your name?
I'm Adam Ganzer. I also don't know what we're doing here. Neither of us know.
Because it's a special episode, baby.
It sure is.
We have a featuring, which, I like to think he directs from time to time, so he can be on the show. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know
I think it's fair.
So we have a guest, and he brought a theory. Introduce yourself, guest.
I know what we're doing. It's me, Michael Swaim.
Hey, it's Michael Swaim.
I really like his director voice. Is that how you're going to do most of this?
Yeah.
I'm liking it.
I want to follow.
Act considerably better now.
Huzzah!
That's the way. I would say that because of my theater background, I'm good at working with actors and very confident in that. But it is directing camera and directing the realities of a production is beyond me. I do tip my hat to you guys because I find it baffling.
Aw. Well,
it's a comfort thing. If you'd have seen me doing my first student film, you'd have said that man will never get to cracked levels.
Well, it's just like, woof. That's a lot of decisions. Yeah.
I came out of the womb ready-made.
As a director?
Yeah.
Good for you.
I had an
Or do you just mean
like,
as a human? Because a lot of us can boast that.
I told the director to cut my umbilical cord.
Cut this cord, please.
Cut. And then immediately after, I was like, action, and I did a flip.
You just had
did a
sex with a
flip?
nurse in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you very much for having me because I do think I only barely qualify as a director, certainly because you kind of mean of film, and I don't do that. But I do have a theory that I've been dying to expound upon. And I heard about your guys' podcast, and I thought I'd check it out. And I was doing the elliptical, and I heard it, and I was like, I'll take a long shot. Keep my fingers crossed. Maybe they'll let me on. So thank you very much.
Hey, we're glad to have you, man.
Our pleasure.
This is dope, dude.
This is a good 6 less movies I had to watch. At least 6 less.
Do you guys have a format? I should know this.
No, we don't. What happens generally is
Do I just go?
that the person who is presenting.
You just go.
Yeah. They just they give us a thesis statement. We give some jokes. We hoist jokes on it, and then you take off.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Show us your bits.
I will start with the thesis. And actually, could I have a preamble?
Yes.
Sure.
Stop
Sure.
asking for caveats. Just go.
My preamble is just the story that about 3.5 years ago, my girlfriend and I were on a tremendous amount of LSD, and we decided to go see Doctor Strange, or whenever it was in theaters. It was a couple years ago at this point. And I don't know if people... So it was the second worst trip of my life. The worst trip of my life being when I went to Disneyland and Cody was there. We got caught on the It's a Small World After All ride and staring at the fake animatronics repeatedly doomed forever to do a cycle of imitating joy made me realize my marriage was a sham. That was the worst acid trip. And then when we got out, Cody wanted to go to Toontown, but it was closed. So really rough for everyone.
I fucking love it, though.
Classic.
But my second worst trip was Jen and I went to see Doctor Strange thinking it would be cool to see. And it was indeed cool to see, but it was so blatantly, to our eyes, a work of white male supremacy that it made us cry in the theater, and we cried all the way home, and we just talked about white supremacy all night. And ever since then, I've really wanted to break down why I think Doctor Strange is one of the most cynical, unintentionally white supremacist works of art I've encountered in a long time. I think it's emblematic of the kind of storytelling that is not coming from a bad place. I guarantee you that's an important caveat. Is this is not an article calling out this guy, that guy, this guy, fuck these guys. And I would say that. I think fuck a lot of people. But I truly think Doctor Strange is chock full of unexamined prejudices and things that people take for granted that have just become ingrained into storytelling. And I want to talk about that because I truly believe storytelling is super important because it's the way we collectively reprogram our brains to accept a wider variety of realities. Or
Correct.
vote for what direction reality, what's normal. I don't know. I saw it on TV 1,000 times. So I believe that scenario could play out. That wouldn't be weird to me. That's how we decide what reality is acceptable and what reality is like, that's stranger than fiction. I can't believe this is happening. I'm going to kind of shut down. And sort of how we program and normalize behaviors. You guys know this, or you wouldn't be directors. Yep. But I think Doctor Strange is way up there. And is that enough? Is that the thesis?
Yeah. I think so.
Thesis statement stated.
So I pitched it. It was the very last thing I pitched it cracked as an article. And then I quit instead. So I got severe blue labia or what have you. And just have been, like, honestly, this is many years coming. Shitting on Doctor Strange in this way.
Excited.
All right.
This is the moment.
Hoist your jokes upon me. I'm gonna pop my top off.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Adam promised he would hoist jokes at me now. Is this that part?
This is the part where the hoisting begins.
Thank God I have a cargo hold full of jokes to hoist on this.
Yeah.
And other pirate-themed comments.
Well, what I want to know is if you guys picked up on this at all in your casual viewing of Doctor Strange.
I did not. I just saw it as another, like, kind of rote version of Iron Man and, like wish fulfillment. I do kind of think I know where you're going, but I want to hear the facts before I espouse my opinion on if you're right.
I'm so scared that
there's something in this.
I'm so scared that this is going to be one of those times where I find out I think terrible things. I do think it's good for us. I think it's good for us to have those experiences wherever they occur. That's the theme of the last month. I would say for middle-aged white guys to hear is like
for
it's
old
good.
Bears everywhere.
Yeah, for old bears everywhere. It's good to find out you think bad things and apologize for them and change. So maybe I'll have that experience because that'll be nice, right?
We don't know what we're walking into, and that's. That's a part of that's the small beans guarantee.
That's right. It's a totally random shot in some direction that we don't know what it will be. The small beans promise.
Portal into who knows what. Yeah, here we go.
Ready.
So if I had had much more time or a financial incentive to do so, I could have boiled this down into a list or some kind of very conducive to dissection. Honestly, I think it would make a good academic paper. But I'm just going to splay all the facts out before you because I didn't structure this verbal essay. So I think I'm going to go through semi-chronologically because that's how I wrote the notes, of course, which we don't usually do. We did it for Coen Brothers, and I think it'll work here. So you'll have to understand this is the last time I'm going to give this caveat, and if people flip out because they skipped the middle, I'll just explain online. But I do think it's important that we tell stories that bring good into the world. And you can tell very disturbing stories with graphic imagery that bring good into the world. That's not what I'm talking about. You'll understand what I'm talking about, listener, as we dive deeper. But one aspect of what I mean is I am not actually decrying as much this movie being released or the people who wrote it as much as I am fascinated by the nested levels within levels that we use fiction to uphold white supremacy and normalize it for ourselves because it is not because we wish it upon our fellow humans, but because it would be very inconvenient to actually address and give up the amount of privilege you would have to in order to make it equal. And I think this movie falls right in there. And I was like, my brain was just lighting up with the same way when you'd know you had a good cracked article on your hands because you're like, there's so much here. So from that lens, I'm now just gonna like rip this movie apart scene by scene, as if it were.
I'm excited for that.
Like just Nazi propaganda. All right.
Nazis. All
So
right,
the
let's
opening
go.
scene, if you've seen it, I mean, this will be a refresher, but I'm not going to break down what's happening as much as attack the facts that build my thesis. So hopefully you've seen it at least once, because this will spoil it. So you got the very opening scene, Mads Mikkelsen, right, stealing the pages themselves that eventually allow for the time loop. Mads steals the pages and gets fought by Tilda, who, of course, this is very surface level, but the Ancient One is actually, an Asian man. And
They took fire for that. And
they took fire
rightfully
for
so.
whitewashing by casting Tilda Swinton. Not as much fire because ScarJo had done something similar and that was bigger at the same time. But Tilda also got some flack, and I think it's notable. And again, I think the writers do this unintentionally, and that's what makes it chef's kiss. That Tilda literally plays a character whose major failing is that they are drawing the energy from another culture's tradition in order to extend their own life, simply because not because they're evil, but because they're scared of death, which is the ultimate change, which is what white people do. They suck on in America. This is specific to American culture, I'll say, for my whole essay, but co-opt other cultures literally as a way to sustain your own culture. But that's a tricky game to play, and this is the main other part of my thesis, because you have to freeze time. You have to devote yourself to fighting for the status quo, because change always brings revolution, and always revolution always changes who's on top and who's on bottom. Speaking of revolutions, the visual theme of the movie is circles and clocks, which are a revolution and represent time. The main symbol as it relates to our hero Doctor Strange is a clock that becomes smashed, as in his power comes from stopping time, stopping history from moving forward.
Also, the dimension that he's stealing from is the dark dimension. Did you catch that?
Oh, man.
I did, but I hadn't gotten to it.
Oh,
in the
my
notes
God.
yet. Oh, dude, it's worse than that.
Really
Let's
upset
just say-
already.
His name is
I'm real
Stephen
upset.
Strange, but let's call him by his initials, the SS. He will. He will later.
Oh my God.
He will later rise to the position of Sorcerer Supreme, or SS.
Nazi doctor.
Holy shit.
And his primary weapon in this film is an energy whip. By the end, he's referred to as Master, and he goes around with his whip.
This is
Okay,
not funny.
but let's
This
get
is
there.
Not funny.
Oh no.
It's interesting.
What do you
It's
mean
interesting.
get there? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think the opening scene's actually deceptively really interesting because Mads and his people all use the whip. Even though, of course, with magic you could make any weapon. And Tilda uses shields. They are sometimes shields or sometimes fans, battle fans.
Yeah.
Battle fans, of course, would be another act of cultural appropriation. If they're shields,
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
she becomes a very clear example of what we would now call. Actually, Karen is a bit strong, I think, but the white feminist that is more interested in issues of white feminism and not as aware of intersectional issues, because later, of course, we'll see that she's presiding over religion based in a culture that she came into, and yet she systematically alienates every person of culture who is in the religion that we meet. And then, of course, the twist that she is a hypocrite. The thing Mad says is true. But we sort of forgive her because we get that you're scared of death. Everyone is. So, yeah. And just as racism is bad, but it's understandable, or like I get neurologically where it comes from.
I didn't
it's
see
still
it as
bad.
that as much, but it's equally damning for your
I
theory.
did think that's somewhat of a stretch, her part. Yeah,
it's
I
not
agree.
too much of a stretch if it's amended, because it's like truly what her version of justification seems to be coming from. You need somewhat, like, once you get to the top of the like food chain and you realize what like reality is, you have to do demonstrative things in order to maintain power. So it is still damning.
Yeah.
It's not because she wants to live longer. I think it's that she wants the society in which she is created to persist, and she needs to maintain power. which is even more damning because it's like, no, that's not how things work. You hand it over when you're done. You know, like if you are wrong person for the job, someone takes your job.
Right.
Exactly.
She is authoritarian. That's for sure.
Exactly.
So why did remind me, because I watched this about a month and a half ago. I should have watched it this afternoon if I'd had time, but
no worries.
So what is her actual justification in the movie for why other people are not allowed to use the dark power, but she is?
No one knows.
She doesn't really justify it as much as she owns it. She says,
"You're right. I'm doing it."
She says, "I am doing that. It was wrong. It's because I'm scared to die, but I will die. Okay, you got me." And she dies.
You got me, and then she dies. Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
More or
she
less,
dies sort
yeah.
of knowing that Steven will take over. You know,
She kind of
But
forced
she
goes.
bequeaths him like
She
you
lasted-
should do this. Basically,
She lasted long enough to hand the torch to another white person because
Yes.
previous to that, there were no white
Right,
people to
there's
hand
no
the
white
torch to.
people.
It's particularly egregious. Even if we weren't putting a reading onto this, like that would be
Right,
egregious
yes.
within the context of the narrative as told.
Well, there's one thread, so I guess I'll get to that I do think is the most egregious within the narrative as told, which is essentially that there's this incredible pattern of the Bagger Vance, or the magic person of color,
Right.
who he every time shits upon. And if you think about it in realistic terms, for no reason, they then immediately give him the kingdom. Like, he shits on people, and they in turn give him everything. And
Right.
it's hard to justify unless you are thinking through the lens of, well, he deserves all these things because he's special. So basically, he is a famous surgeon. We start with him really just owning Earth, Wind, and Fire, a classic funk song, of course, brought to us by black people, but, you know, he's made it his own. And, of course, also that song, by the way, it should have been for Fantastic Four. Earth, the Thing, Wind, Invisible Woman, Fire. I mean, that's not a stretch. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, so his first case is to save a dead patient, and he essentially uses as his primary weapon classic toxic masculinity. Like, he basically beta cucks the other surgeon, who represents just like a guy, and he mansplains to him and cockblocks him by saying, "Dr. West, cover your watch." So Western culture, stop time.
Right.
All right, continuing on. This starts a pattern where, I'm sorry, I missed a big thing. He gets in a car accident, right?
Right.
He gets in a car accident because he's trying to be James Bond and Dr. House combined or whatever in his little Porsche fantasy. And he flips it, and he wakes up, and his hands, the symbol of control, have been broken, right? His control is threatened. And the first thing he does is tell his black physical therapist that he's wrong and he's an idiot. The black physical therapist then tells him where he can find someone who can magically cure his paralysis. He then goes to that guy who turns out to be Latino. The Latino guy tells him how he can cure his paralysis. He says, "You're an idiot. That's bullshit." And he says, "Well, here's the address." For no reason. Doctor
Right.
Strange then goes to that place. The lady who runs it, first of all, he mistakes the male for the person who runs it because he assumes
Yeah,
the man must
yeah.
run it. They do a little bit about that sexist. Actually, I run it. I'm the ancient one, blah, blah, blah. He says, this religion's stupid. I'm king shit. She touches him in the brain and shows him everything the universe has to offer.
Right.
He says, "Please teach me." She says, "No." Later, she says, "Okay, you can lead the religion." And I mean like 80 hours later. This is like
Right.
in the time of the movie.
Yeah.
So, and it's just, and then the other big one I love, the most crystallized to me, is when he meets Wong, he makes a couple Iron Man-esque jokes like, "Hey, books are stupid. This
Adele.
religion is stupid, right? This is
Yeah.
all pretty dumb." And he goes, literally the line is, "You insult me. Those are the you insult me. Come with me." Cut to him in the special VIP room of the library while Wong says, "No one's ever allowed in here except when I decide they're special." And it's like all you know about him is he came in and said, "This is all pretty dumb." Then he goes immediately as if mystically, the same way the Cape would choose him later, he goes for the book that Mads Mikkelsen stole and turns exactly to the page that Mads Mikkelsen stole. And he says, "What's this?" And Wong says, "Well, Mads Mikkelsen was drawn to it because he's so evil." He's drawn to it. He just did the exact sequence of magical things that the evil guy did that is the reason we're assuming he's evil.
That's true.
It's insane. And the only reason he's more evil is because he agreed with like an evil time demon. Now, what the time demon, of course, represents is that our universe will enter a new form. It's not that everyone will die. It's that our universe will be totally transmogrified into something completely different. It's interesting in this film that that's what the stakes are. It is not the destruction of the universe like in Endgame, but rather that the universe would become so weird that you would be scared of it. That is what white America fears. That is not the normal stakes of a movie. That is a unique twist, unique to Doctor Strange, that I think helps my thesis.
I think that's arguable, that last bit.
Then let's argue it, baby.
Well, it's just that it's how it's presenting it as a literal truth versus a symbolic truth. I think you're correct with the symbolic truth, but the literal truth is that Dormammu is lying. He's lying to his zealots by saying, like, "No, baby, I'm gonna, like, it's all gonna be sweet,
What shows
baby."
us that it will be bad? Do we ever know definitively that joining Dormammu is bad?
Because of the ending to Mads Mikkelsen's character, right? Isn't that indicative of how it was going to be
brought
bad?
upon actually by Doctor Strange, but
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
But I, from what I understand, he is known as a world eater. He eats worlds.
Okay. Yeah, if other universes are telling us, no, he's bad news, then I believe it in the universe of the movie.
I think that's what we're supposed to believe. It's true that we don't interact with those worlds, but I don't understand how we could since they're dead.
Sure.
But it's like a well-known thing in the spiritual realms, written about in books, that kind of thing. But doesn't change the fact that what you're saying is that, like, he's basically prioritizing... Because he knows this world, he's prioritizing this world over the concept of another. That is a symbolic truth.
Right.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Does it totally undermine your theory that in the dark dimension time also doesn't exist? Because that's part of
potentially,
the...
and I'll admit that we're off book here. The Dormammu detail is not in my notes. I thought I could slip one past you guys on the fly,
okay.
and I think it might have been a stretch.
No,
That's fine.
Collar pull.
This theory is fucking nuts. It's so good to me
Okay, good.
that I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, give it a pass. Let's just line up all of the things that look alike at this point because
also,
it's fun.
we don't do like, hey, this is the only take in this show.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Abe came in the first episode with like, here's a correlation with color, and not everything fits it. So you're in good company here.
Okay.
Yeah, you're with geniuses.
I mean, I haven't heard the show, but I believe you.
Enjoy the genius couch.
Yeah, exactly.
We've sat on it before.
And then, of course, the one that actually was picked up by sites like Cracked and BuzzFeed and Gawker and Collider is people talking about how weird it is that Chiwetel Ejiofor is Mordo, who in the comics is like the arch nemesis, one of the arch nemeses of Doctor Strange, and is a dangerous maniac. And in this, he plays a devout follower of the Way, who, after Doctor Strange takes it over the whole religion in several days, and says, "No, we're doing this now." He says, "I will follow this path no more." Now, the Ancient One says, his youth makes him brash and like strong-headed, which I would argue is essentially saying that the black dude is like, he's an angry black man. Don't worry about him. And she later says as a quote, sorry, where is it? I scrolled too far. I taught Mordo to defeat his demons and live within the natural law. Apparently the natural law being that she is the head of the thing and he's too hot-headed to make decisions, right? Discounting his opinion. But a lot of people talked about that, especially now with the shakeup in Multiverse of Madness. I don't think that they're going to do what they were going to do, which is have him become the main villain in the second one. I think they're actually taking it in a different direction because
they're clearly
there was blowback.
signaling that he'll be back. So but that's things change in Marvel all the time.
Yeah. So the other main thing that I think is hard to explain, which is appropriate because this is a movie about nested loops and trippiness, and my thesis is about the nesting of the writer's brains within the reality of the character they're writing about. But I feel that the primary arc of this movie is broken, and it's broken in such a way that it forms a spiral. And what I mean by that is Doctor Strange has several key lines in the Act 1, which are his partner says, "You think everything's about you." And that's obviously, if you know anything about like writing basic Marvel movies, that's what he's supposed to learn by the end, that everything is not about him, right? That's his lesson. That's a starting point. And similarly, I mean, if you're doing screenwriting for a 4-quadrant audience, you usually hit the point home a few times. So in Act 1, he also says, she says, "This isn't about your hands." And he goes, "How is it not about my hands? I have to fix my hands, not fighting some mystical war." So it's about control, but it's about him learning humility. However, the form of his learning humility turns out to be that he becomes the unquestioned messiah of a whole religion who, like Jesus Christ, experienced infinite suffering by dying over and over a million times for our sins, with the knowledge that he couldn't be saved and no one would ever know, and it was a pure sacrifice. But it's not, because he lives to come back to a world that he's king shit in, that he owns, and he can brag about what he did, and everyone knows. It's like and yet
you have your cake and eat it too.
What he's bragging
is essentially what it is.
What he's bragging about is that he's the type of guy who would never do that. He's the type of guy who would sacrifice himself for everyone and never breathe a word about it. But how do you know that? Because you're experiencing a movie about how he's such a great guy, that he's the type of guy who would sacrifice himself infinitely and never reveal anything about it. And the movie ends with him standing in a panopticon staring out at the city while his hands, which are healed, so he has full control again, fondle his broken watch because he has stopped the forward march of history. Because
his hands do shake. His hands do shake.
But he has magic.
But it doesn't
matter. He doesn't need hands
yeah.
anymore. He has a deeper form of control, which is the intangible systems that sustain the entire world. So magic, unlike his hands, which used to have to react to the real world, he now literally is the king of the system that sustains the world. There are 3 areas on Earth that are considered like these 3 magical shields, and the entire basis for why his belief set deserves, quote unquote, to dominate is because, yeah, but we're protecting you. We are the shields. We are literally, we're the white knights. So you have to let us have this system. The system is invisible. The system might oppress you. It might disenfranchise Chiwetel Ejiofor. It might insult and disrespect Wong. But trust us, it's protecting you from people like Mads, who incidentally, I'm exactly like.
Right.
And it's all a loop.
Right.
And it's even a further loop to me because the writers writing this are part of white American supremacy, which is doing this. And our tool for perpetuating this is movies like this. And voila. So other than that, I have like details on details. But that's the shape of the thesis. And as you can imagine, when that occurred to me on acid, when he goes endlessly looped time, and I'm like, he's Jesus, but if Jesus took credit for it, but if the story was about how he didn't take credit for it, Jen and I like fell to our knees in the street and we're like, this is the trippiest, it's a spiral, white supremacy's a spiral. People are like, this is an Arby's, sir.
Yeah, it's a spiral, because it's all going, it's over the gravity of its own ego and destruction.
And he certainly doesn't learn that things don't revolve around him. He finds out that he's Harry Potter superhero man.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. He can't learn humility with the way that the movie's structured.
That's most superhero movies.
But that's also American exceptionalism. We deserve to be a hero, but we can't fully explain why. But trust us, we got this. And we deserve the privileges that we have.
There's real bad guys out there.
There's worse white guys. You got to understand. Yeah.
Which, it's compelling when you just need to kill bad guys, but it's also, like, well, once that's done, I guess, like, don't expect that you're going to not, you're still on the ringer for things you did,
Right.
you know? And I think that what opens it up for me is that you bring up that it's a invisible system. An invisible system of like kind of like a nepotism or like a nodding in or a club.
It's very cult-like if the cult was right, if everything the cult said
Exactly.
was true. And imagine if in Scientology you were a person of color who served the thing your whole life, and then what's his name? Dead Scientology guy, Hubbard, handed it over to Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise had just joined Scientology that week. You would be like, I think race is a factor.
Yeah, you'd be right. Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty stunning because he's also like, I think this is like a subtle but very strong argument. He's a real asshole. Like Doctor Strange is a real asshole. Like one of the least likable protagonists ever in a movie.
He sides with the female doctor in the beginning in order to humiliate the male doctor. And then when the female doctor tries to join in the surgery that he just supported her on, he shuts her down and mansplains what's going to happen. Then afterwards, he takes credit for a procedure that they co-invented. It's like, really specific. Like that's the scenes where I wonder, actually it makes sense. I wonder where they are being intentional, and they probably are, because in their minds, these are the scenes where he's still not humble. But my point is, they forgot to put in the scenes where he becomes humble. That doesn't happen.
Like it's not like he has to abdicate the power that he gets. See, because that's like the trick. If you want to make a person humble, they hang up their cape. Right? Like there's a moment where they could be a hero or they hang up their cape in a sort of act of humility. That's what should happen, because that's the ultimate act of humility. I'm going to set aside the superpowers and be a person.
No, his signs are the cape and the signet of the king. Like that's royalty symbols. Yeah.
So like congratulations on your suicide loop. Like that doesn't make him humble.
Right.
At all.
He knew he would win. He knew what the end would be.
Even if he didn't.
I think this is actually what I love about the Christ story, is the key point is his moment of doubt on the cross. If he didn't have a moment of doubt, he wouldn't have been suffering the pain of dying for our sins, because he wouldn't have been like a human. That's the crux of the narrative to me. And Doctor Strange doesn't go through that, really. And yet, he walks around with shaking, broken hands, feigning weakness, well, he secretly runs the system that runs the world. And I think that is white America in some regards.
Yeah.
The fact that you can so easily draw the parallels is very disturbing.
That's disturbing to me.
It's like, whoa.
Of everything about your theory, how I immediately got there in like 10 seconds of you just announcing what the movie was. And that is the power of normalization, because like a lot of what you're saying, like, we're definitely reading into it, you know? Like, the movie takes for granted the fact that he is the best.
He's good.
He's the best surgeon.
And it takes for granted I'm ignoring...
And movies do this all the time.
Sorry.
They do it all the time, because we have to believe that our person that we're following is really great. You know, like, they're just... I saw it recently. I just watched Marshall. Have you seen Marshall? It's actually not that bad. I thought it was another like Oscar grab. It's actually a solid film. And we're just supposed to believe that our protagonist is way better, because he like comes in and he's just yelling at Josh Gad like, "You're bullshit. I am the best lawyer." Now, that's actually an autobiographical thing, so it makes a lot more sense. But like almost any time that we have a protagonist that walks in and is like, and this is all superhero movies as well, like you just have to take that for granted. If you don't take it for granted, though, it reveals a lot more like a damaging system that is normalized. And I think that's the crux and the key to your theory, is that ask that question of all movies. Like, well, what if he wasn't though? You know, like what if this person wasn't?
What if
the
I didn't
best
give him the
surgeon
benefit
boy?
of the doubt?
Yeah, if he wasn't the best surgeon boy, then maybe, because it can be explained away by people who disagree with, let's say, this theory.
They'd say he
by
gets
saying like,
results.
well, the reason that he's like Rachel McAdams is like it's a co-project, but he takes credit is because, I mean, he's the best surgeon though, right? So he probably
Deserves the
designed
credit or
it more.
whatever, yeah.
Right. Well, it's like, well, that you're just ushering that in. You're just allowing that to go just by the assumption that he's the best.
Yeah.
What does that reveal about us? So, yeah, it's very revealing.
It is very revealing. See, now I'm trying to think like a director, right? Because like that's part of.
I was going to say this also is a weird fit, which is why I extra appreciate you guys letting me stink up the joint, because I would argue this is more of like a writer piece theater than a director piece. Your theses actually involve the directing. This is purely structural content problems.
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
No. So
we got some episodes coming up.
There's that, and also, so here's the argument though. And I think like the part where the directing has to connect to it, and it definitely does, is we've all made things, right? We've all directed things, and we've tried to cultivate a set of colleagues who, if a thing like that happened, they would tell you before you released it, right? Like you,
if they saw that in your work,
well, I mean, yeah, even
or if
unintentional.
they
No.
joined a magic, powerful team that.
Well, again,
underlied all
so Marvel movies aren't done in a vacuum. They're not some auteur goes
I
with a
see.
script. They work with a team, right? And like where every facet of it is mulled over. Now, of course, those kinds of things happen. Like I can think of a couple of things that happened at Cracked where there was like some real accidental bad implications. I can remember a couple of times. But like they were immediately acknowledged and apologized for, and they slipped past people. That's not what this is. This is a thoughtless inclusion of a narrative. Like, and I say that because I don't think that they're like trying to say it, as you said, right?
That's what I mean. It's a narrative that's totally acceptable because it's a narrative that's been normalized for so long.
But it's so easy
Yeah.
to it's not that hard to do a read where you think about these issues. It's, by the way, it's like your fundamental responsibility when you're making a movie is to like, hey, let's read this and make sure there's nothing about it that out of necessity communicates a message we don't want, right? And that's part of what it means to have a diverse group of collaborators and allies as a creator. Is like, I would hope that if somebody sent the Doctor Strange script to me, or like they sent me their casting choices and I looked at it, I'd be like, that's a lot of white people in the positions of power here, right?
I would have hoped, if nothing else, and I think I would have had the note, he doesn't learn to be humble by the end, though.
Yes,
this doesn't
huge
fulfill
problem.
the screenplay promise. Yeah.
Huge problem. I also think that because they've cast Benedict Cumberbatch in particular, it really reinforces that aspect, because Benedict Cumberbatch is a little bit of an arrogant prick as a type. I don't mean as a human being, as a type.
Right. I have no idea as a human being, but yes, of course, he's Arch, he's Sherlock. He looks like a bird, like he looks
Right.
down on you.
Yeah, he always looks like he is better than you. That's
You
his
know
thing.
how birds all think they're fucking better than us?
They
Fucking
sure do.
birds.
Lauding it over us
Yeah.
in the sky with their wings.
That's why they shit on us. They literally shit
Yep.
on us.
They literally
Look
shit
at you,
on
the
us,
targets.
birds. I'm putting you on notice, birds.
Yeah. Hey, targets with hair. You fools.
No, that's right. That's right. That's his type.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
point. Yes.
And like, don't think that people in Hollywood don't know that. They do know that for sure, right? Come on, he's getting the same parts.
We saw in the Sony leak the emails about Denzel not being able to travel. It's ridiculous. Like that's
Right.
what I'm talking about and that's why I think Doctor Strange is the perfect one for dealing with this, is because it is not a piece of hate art, but it is about a magician. It's insidious and it's about a magician. And I would say that's very important because I'm a big believer when I talk about narrative programming our behavior and it's how we domesticate ourselves. I believe that in a literal sense. Like there's a lot of studies that back this up I won't go into, but the idea that language is intrinsic to consciousness. For example, like the person who raised his daughter without the word blue, and she didn't have the ability to see blue as a result. it's arguable whether you're like, well, she saw blue, but she called it gray mistakenly, or is she really perceiving something different? But the point is, words and consciousness are very linked. Our ability to speak and think in words is one of the reasons we have the level of consciousness we have. And I do think we are undergoing a process of domesticating ourselves, and we're now self-aware enough that we program our own future behavior, and stories are what we do to do that. It's just a self-domestication tool, or a self-push whatever message you want tool, essentially. And that tradition goes back to all kinds of pantheons, including like from high and low, from literal gods pantheons to wrestling pantheons to obviously comics heroes. And all of these things are archetypal. And the reason pantheons become a thing, in part, I think, is because the archetypes that make them up are boiled down to such a simple, powerful singularity that it hits so many people that you're like, yes, that. The king, the god of the sea. Of course there's one of those. Everyone knows the sea. It's big around here. And I feel
the
like
speciousness of archetypes.
Yeah, and I feel like superheroes,
they feel true, therefore are true.
Especially the Avengers and the more successful ones are successful partly because they embody really relatable archetypes. Like Captain America is the soldier and the patriot, right? And Black Widow's the spy, or there's these story archetypes, and I just think it is so perfectly fitting that the movie that I'm lambasting for being subtly white supremacist is The Magician, because that's
One
that's
could call
what
it
fucking
a
is,
great
man.
wizard.
White supremacy is the grand wizard, dude.
The grand wizard. There
Because
it
they-
is.
You're a wizard, Benny. You're a wizard.
Because this persistent problem we're having with a culture of inherent racism that's not really questioned, that's not the Captain America shit. The Captain America shit is the Nazis who go out on the street wearing the swastikas, and we mostly are at a point where we punch them in the head. Great.
Great.
But we still need to deal with the wizards of the world. And by that, I mean the very undefinable, but they're there, and actually you can define them. They're just more ephemeral, racist systems and underlying things that just take a penny here, take a penny there, disenfranchise voters here and there, and lead to we cannot get out of this cycle. All right, so before I run out of time, if I may, can I transition a bit?
Yeah, you're halfway there.
Oh, okay. So last note that's purely on Doctor Strange before I do that. His other weapon is the sling ring. This is nothing. No, this is nothing. But the sling ring clearly looks like a brass knuckle. Brass knuckles they were invented for the Roman Colosseum. They were called the cestus. And of course, Rome is famous as the godfather of like the imperialist empire. And the insidious aspect of white supremacy that I think is modeled by the way the dark dimension works is that he's entering a culture that is not his own, reaping all the benefits, facing none of the consequences, then at the end telling himself, that was good. It was good that I did that. I saved them all. Which is kind of Rome's deal.
So just
will make you safe. Give us all your money.
Roman's symbology is
That's all. Anyway,
that's a good
But
footnote.
I wanted to bring up because the very next time I did acid was my birthday this weekend.
Ooh.
And that time, Jennifer and I watched at home, of course, Into the Spiderverse, which I had been meaning to watch on acid ever since I saw it because I think it had what I thought Doctor Strange would have, and Doctor Strange only actually had like 10 minutes of that. But Into the Spider-Verse is like
Another Marvel?
wall-to-wall, trippy, beautiful shit. Well, I just highly recommend it for an acid trip under safe conditions.
Yeah.
But that said, I also found myself having a similar experience as I had with Doctor Strange, but in the opposite direction. And I have a lot to say about it, but I only want to really bring to the fore one thing because it pairs so well, because it's another spiral. And I love it I love Spider-Verse so much for this, and I just hope that we see more storytelling in this vein, and I think we are. But basically, and Adam, I know you haven't had a chance to see it yet, but there's only one aspect I'm going to talk about, and I think the people listening will need a refresher on it too. But if you'll recall, or if you haven't seen it, the structure of the film is basically built around repeatedly having various Spider-Men and women and people and pigs and Nick Cage's, who I don't count as any of those things, say, listen, here's the deal. Let's go through it one more time. You know me. I'm Gwen Stacy. I got bitten by a radioactive spider. This happened. My uncle died. I became Spider-Woman. Right? 50 minutes later in the movie, you'll meet another Spider-Man. It'll be
Chris
Noir
Pine,
Spider-Man, and he'll go, listen, this is what happened to me. And they give the origin story, and their comic cover flops down in a shot. And the pile builds. Over the movie, we flop all the comic covers down, and it becomes a recurring joke where they go faster and faster, and Spider-Hams is really dumb because that's the bit, right?
Right.
Now, incredible setup and payoff to me. Really laudable filmmaking. One of the main emotional climaxes of the film, structurally speaking, is that there's a point where Miles Morales finally becomes Spider-Man, accepts the mantle, and we feel that he is Spider-Man. And in that moment, they silently just show his comic cover dropping on the table. And it gives me chills. And I wanted to understand why that moment was so impactful to me. And I think I have a theory, which is that where Doctor Strange uses its multiverse theorem to create the idea that there's infinite threats and infinite others, and that justifies us controlling our own space. Spiderverse literally models what it is to have empathy for another living creature structurally. It's a different kind of story structurally, and it's also interesting to note that structure, if you graphed it, would be a spider web, which is so beautiful to me as icing on the cake. But what I mean essentially is what they've done is take people's whole life stories and boil them down to boilerplate. We don't have time. You're focused on Miles. With Miles, we spend time, we unpack his life, we live with him, we learn details, right? Because he's the protagonist, and that's what your life is like. You live in every moment, and you experience everything. So we got to spend a lot of time with Miles. His life story is the one that we're identifying with as our own for this period. The other people, sorry, there's not enough time in the movie. What's your life about? Got it, moving on. The second Miles's comic hits, you realize this entire movie has been his origin story, which retroactively means, transitively, that every story you just witnessed bundled up could have been unpacked into a full movie, and you immediately intuit a full Spider-Verse, by which I mean you immediately do the act of realizing that no matter how truncated it is from your perspective, every single living creature has a full life story. And that is the opposite of solipsism, and it is the only thing that drives empathy. And I love that in the moment this happens in the movie, it immediately cuts to a joke shot that's 2001 with all the lights going by, but all he's seeing are webs, which basically is just...
It's all full of web.
What does a web represent? Nothing but interconnectedness. As we've said, like glass is see-through and breakable. Webs, all it has is interconnection. That's what a web is.
Wow. Wow. It's so I'm calling this theory the difference between like competing singularities.
They both posit a multiverse, and one's about empathy and one's about be scared of the outside. Yeah.
And when you think of when you say spiral, it makes me think of that short film that we made about spirals, but it's how it when you think of like a black hole, right? Mm-hmm. And the accretion disk, you can think a lot about. There's many things to think about with black holes, but one thing about them is the gravity. That's the basic thing, is like how much the gravity pulls you in. With Doctor Strange, the gravity is tyrannical. It is demanding that you toe the line. It's demanding that you listen to this one voice. In Spiderverse, the plurality and multitude of voices become one voice, and that magnitude becomes the gravity.
Yep, and and you know it's intentional because their moral line and their resonant line in their film is Miles Morales saying, "But it doesn't matter. Anyone could wear the mask. You could wear."
Yeah,
It's making
exactly.
me choke up right now. You
it's
could wear
great.
the mask, and I choke up not because of that one movie, but because as someone who believes that storytelling actually influences human behavior, it's beautiful
It's
to me that
a
a team
valuable
put together such a
message.
valuable brainwashing tool.
Yeah.
It's good brainwashing. Yeah.
It's not only good brainwashing, but it's because the idea behind the thought is so pure
Yeah.
and so correct that's why if you brainwashing, that makes me think of like authoritative, like you
I'm
just
being
do
tongue
this.
in cheek, but I think
But yeah.
Yeah, in the sense that, well, this is a whole nother conversation. I'm like, isn't any substance that gets into your body a drug or on the spectrum of, and isn't any thought brainwashing? I don't know. That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
I just mean
It's
are on a
yeah.
spectrum, not a clear delineation.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. That is a valuable assessment. That is the Spider-Man nod and the interconnectivity of the characters as being the strength of the force that is fighting evil, as opposed to the let's just agree that there's someone who's best suited to fight them and throw them and give them complete power, is two different methodologies of leadership, and it's two different ways of seeing the world.
Yeah. And I love that.
One is more valuable than the other. So
I agree there. I love that. Love is a strong word, but I think it's interesting that the next Doctor Strange is called Multiverse of Madness, which I could be wrong, but I have to imagine means they are somewhat capitalizing intentionally or unintentionally on how good Spider-Verse was or how well it did, or the idea of, the multiverse, it's time for that. And that's just so funny because that's what Doctor Strange would do under the aegis of my theory, right? The mixed
co-op.
The mixed
Yeah.
kid has a cool narrative. Oh, we can steal that. We can absorb that and build it into our app. We don't,
But it isn't
we'll
our
do our
mainstream,
multiverse.
though. I mean, we got Benedict Cumberbatch for this.
And I'm going to call it now. I assume in the Doctor Strange sequel, the message is going to be that, yes, there's a lot of dimensions, but ours is the right good one. Like, I bet that will be the underlying structure, and I'm just calling that now.
Somehow the other dimensions will be a
Are
threat.
bad, yeah. Whereas
Yeah.
in Spider-Verse, the other
Therefore,
dimensions are just
how
other
dare they?
dimensions with other stuff happening in them.
It's like we all agree to, that, you came from that dimension. Cool. It is true that in Into the Spider-Verse, there is a little bit of everything in its right place.
Well, there's an
at the
unknown
end.
force that makes it that you have to be in your lane or your body disintegrates. There's no, the gods
Right,
of the story
exactly.
just
There's-
made it that way.
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, that's, I mean, in the same way that a lot of the stuff, the gods of
Yeah.
the writers made it that way in
I like
both
their use of the
features.
goober, though. But Adam, I really, it's a great movie, so I don't want to spoil too much even for Adam. I think he should watch it.
It's
Sounds
the
good.
best it's the best superhero movie you
It's the
could
best
watch.
superhero movie. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's one of the greatest feats of sheer animation. It's
Yeah,
some
if
of the
you like
some of the
animation at all, it's
sequences you can't.
fantastic.
It's hard to wrap your head around how much work must have gone into animating some of the sequences.
And just like really intelligent ways of like saying like, how do you do an animation sequence? We're gonna completely like throw it on its head, and you're gonna think for half of it that it's upside down is not upside down, and then we're gonna show the reveal, and then you realize that you've been watching it in water
Truly
or
stuff
something
that
like that.
even
Like,
with today's modern capabilities, you couldn't or wouldn't do in live action. So, and I love when mediums are able to do that. Yeah. Okay. So I'll end on something I'm sure is not intentional because Stan Lee created him, or Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, I think. But Doctor, which is a sign of authority, and Strange, which is slang for female genitalia. So authority over women is literally his name.
Jeez.
I don't think that. What archaic? What
I know
mean,
that's my
that's
weakest
hilarious.
one.
That's
I know
fucking
that's my
hilarious.
weakest one.
But like, that's who's using the word strange to
We
mean
gotta
that
find
these
a bit
days.
strange.
What are we in fucking Deadwood?
You don't think Steve Ditko and Stan Lee went trolling for strange?
Well, I definitely think that's true. Yeah, I mean,
I
sure,
created
sure,
Doctor
man.
Doom, love. How about a little strange?
Is
He
he
is
British?
He is now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he is
I'm
now-
Stan fucking Lee.
I'm Stan Lee, eh? I'm a terrible. I can't do British accents.
Really?
Why do I even try? That
That's
Yeah,
the
okay.
theory. That's all I got. I blasted through it.
I love this Doctor Strange theory so much, and it does, like you said, make me enjoy Into the Spider-Verse a lot more. And it's weird that they're both Marvel.
I wasn't even going to bring Spider-Verse into
But
it,
that-
but they're both Marvel, so I thought it was fair.
I mean, that speaks to the. I mean, let's get real. The conglomeration of like a corporate, the corporate takeover
The
of
tent
ideology.
is so big it can hold many differing viewpoints, and the tent just wants money to come
Yeah.
in. That's all the tent wants.
And that's why they're like snakes.
Yeah.
That's why they're like snakes, because they're like, oh yeah, we got white supremacy over here, and it's like, fuck you guys for that. What are you talking about? We got all you know,
you can give
cultural
us our
relevance
money.
over
You can
here
give us money too. We sell cultural relevance
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
And it's like, it's just leave it to Marvel to be like, Black Lives Matter, but also all lives matter. You know, it's like that. Of course, because they're fucking Disney.
Again, I don't even think that's that at that level. That is not an intentional malicious intent on Disney's part. It's such a large corporation. That's what happens. It encompasses some of everything.
Yeah.
It's just a cross section of humanity, essentially. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's you know, it seems to be how our world is working, which is
we're
a shame.
consolidating.
It's a goddamn shame.
It's still-
that movies like Into the Spider-Verse aren't like big movies, and Doctor Strange is, despite the thought and quality that went
Spider-Verse
into
made a ton
the
of
respective
money,
films.
but not as much as Doctor Strange. Yes. No,
not
not
as
nearly
much,
as
yeah.
much. Not nearly as much.
It still
have
is
something, Adam?
avoidable. Like you can't stress that. That's to me like the thing that makes it important to think about as like filmmakers, right? Is like this
Yes.
is an avoidable mistake. It's not
Accurate.
like it's not like, oh, if you had to write this or make this movie, hope you don't spit out your racism. You know what I mean? Like it's not
Right.
Like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I don't have accidental subconscious views.
Yep.
That are bad.
Same.
I have them.
Of
I know.
course.
I know I do. Right. Or experiences that are like, ooh, you know, like they're troubling. The hope is, again, I can't say this enough. No filmmaker, not a single filmmaker, especially not one in Marvel, is working in isolation. So, like, this happened in part because they didn't look for these problems. Like, nobody did a read and was like, hey, man, you know, like, let's look at all the headshots or whatever it is, or let's look at the cast. Is this going to send a weird message? Because the instant you said the thesis, it wasn't like Abe and I were, like, stroking our beards wondering, is this going to hang together?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, no.
we were
oh,
like, yep,
no.
it's there, baby.
You know what I mean? And so,
It's
like,
there.
and I say that, I'm not trying to this is not a high and mighty thing. I don't blame the filmmakers for having latent mistaken ideas. I blame the infrastructure in this case for not working to fix it.
Yeah, it's
You know what I
lazy.
mean?
Yeah.
It's lazy. We're
Right? I mean, like,
should
you know,
be better than this at this point.
to pull the veil back a little bit, we talked a lot at Cracked. After, like, at a certain point in time, we became aware of the fact that it was like, you know what, we need to make actual changes and decisions to make sure that we are not just hiring white people. Like, we had to make decisions.
And we tracked,
like-
I remember tracking in one of the series and admitting to myself that, like, yes, when I edit, I cut to the men more than the women. And, like, using a stopwatch to make sure I stop doing that. You got to do stuff.
Right. Well, and
That's
like
all.
it started.
It's okay
it
to
started
be
with-
wrong, but you got to do
Yeah.
something about it when you get called out.
It started with some painful realizations and a couple of mistakes.
Yes, of
And
course.
It had a few along the way too. God, there's stories I wish I could tell. They're not worth telling right now.
No, but yeah, it stings to have a coworker be like, I think you're a little bit sexist, but it's good that they told you that. You have to know that.
Yeah. I mean,
you have
You
to
get
know.
over it, and it won't happen again
That's
in
how
the
you
future
check yourself.
And
if you heed the warning. Yeah,
it's so easy.
Self-policing doesn't work.
It's so easy to have the conversation in a way that isn't like, all right, sit down, and now I'm going to shame the fuck out of you for this.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to be like, listen, I'm just concerned it's going to communicate this. And it's so easy to look at the work as objective from you and be like, it will communicate that. Oh, no, I better fix it.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And you feel bad because you put it out in the world, but also, look, if we all had the power to control every single thing our minds thought and created as we were channeling our words, like, we'd be making different things than this.
Right.
That's a fact. That's just a fact, So what's missing here is the appetite for clarity and for avoiding these kind of mistakes, and the self-awareness on the part of the people who are centrally responsible for this film of like, hey, am I saying something I shouldn't say?
And the prioritization, the fact that it's not important
I think
enough.
it's that they think, well, it's just a fun romp. We don't need to care what we say because it's not saying anything. But what they don't realize is you can't not say anything. It's impossible. So
Right.
By abdicating the control of the clarity of your message, you're just spinning the dial or letting your subconscious dictate the message, because you are not doing due diligence of, look, I know it's just a silly movie about a wizard, but what are wizards symbolic of, and what is this saying about that theme? Let's do our due diligence here. That's all. Children's movies do it. Pixar stood out from the pack by simply treating kids as smart enough to care about payoff and have the payoff matter and relate to the structure and shit. That's all they did. They were like not lazy about making children's films.
And if I can, this is just my opinion. It's not the stated position of Small Beans or whatever. But to me, there are some of the things you said are things that your brain connected to because of your exceptional ability to make pattern recognition and word connections. You have an exceptional ability to do that. So the fact that SS is his name and stuff, whatever. I don't care about that.
Right.
But
it's more of a
the
joke.
the casting of Tilda Swinton, the fact that every person of color in the movie gets marginalized, the fact that a white guy takes over religion that's clearly meant to culturally appropriate several
like a
other religions that are not,
but several. It's an amalgam. Yeah.
that are not primarily from the Western tradition, which means they're not associated with white people, suggests they didn't think about that, because that's obvious stuff.
Yeah.
Those are obvious things. They're not accidental messages, right? This isn't numerology or some shit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know. Yeah, it's I go back and forth because I totally agree with you. The SS, it seems so minor, but when you add it all together, that I could send you a postcard from this movie and fairly describe it as a master wizard using his whip, and his initials are SS. That's too many. You should have caught some of those.
That's already too many. I'm not even finished.
That's all.
And I think that adds to it.
Yes, but those are just little
I think what Adam's
fun
saying
things
is
to
important.
nerd out about or whatever.
What's important, just to prioritize, and go back, and when we hear the theory, heard the theory, some of it is laughable because it's outrageous how far they didn't
let
care
the ball
to
drop.
cover their ass on that. There's Adam's right. There is a very unlaughable thing going on, though, which is the darkness of how mainstream works in this country, in the world, how America works, and it needs to be checked. It needs to be checked.
Right, and
it's
you start
alarming.
to see, it's funny and sad in a way, but it's really the blockbuster movies that are the cultural signifiers in some ways, because they're the ones where people are not trying to think through these issues, so they're just trying to find what's a way to make money. You know what I mean? Or
Absolutely.
like that's
It's
where they
them-
have the most potential for that problem.
It's the stories
Right.
that are most based on predicting. It's Family Feud, predicting what you think
Right.
the masses think, and sometimes that can be a very big insight into what the masses think. In the case of a very perceptive filmmaker, sometimes it's just a window into what the filmmaker thinks people think. You know what I mean? If they happen
And-
to have weird underlying perspectives that are shifted or what have you.
And additionally, in an even more
Like Michael Bay with the
damning way,
age of consent thing.
people who watch Family Feud more start to pick up a regurgitation of what they are to themselves, and then let's say they go on Family Feud and act accordingly. And normalization has,
I
like
see what you're
reared its
saying is in
ugly
life
head.
there are these spirals. Like all of the system is a normalization
Yes.
machine. Yeah.
It's an engine. It's an engine that
It's
perpetuates
a
itself.
Snowpiercer. Let's not beat around the bush here.
It's a Snowpiercer that uses orphan children in order to make
That's
everyone
right. That's right.
happy. Happy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's important if you're going to do a reading on like sort of a social issue, which is part of directing. You know, it's important, I think, as a filmmaker to ask yourself, what are the pieces of filmmaking that could have fixed this problem? You know, casting's the biggest one, but also just there was no producer doing a read. It makes me like I kind of sometimes I think about Fight Club as like a conversation about sexism, right? For the same reason, it's sort of like it's so evident in Fight Club that nobody had a real voice in it.
That's
that
so
was
it's
a woman.
it's so obviously about masculinity that no one thought to view it through the lens of masculinity or question it. Because they were just busy being boys and masculining out.
and I think in some ways that movie is a lot more excusable because it is at least a satire or sort of a dark commentary on the issue itself.
On capitalism, at least, yeah.
Right. Well, and also on masculinity. They talk a lot explicitly
they
about
do.
masculinity.
Capitalism's fueled by making me think I'll be a man if I do these things, yeah.
Right. Our
they
fathers are a model
interrelate.
for God.
Yeah.
You know, like he left us. What does that tell you about God? Which that monologue is amazing, by the way. Anyway, so the point is like that's a movie where they chose to exclude a point of view, and you know I think they suffer in the hindsight machine because who knows what it would have been like if they'd had I don't know a couple female producers on there. They were just like, hey, maybe Marla can be a little bit more of a thing than what she is here. Hey, maybe, we shouldn't totally worship Brad Pitt for who he is.
Right.
Hey, maybe make a different
Or
movie.
similarly, like if Doctor Strange had said no, I think Chiwetel Ejiofor should lead the church. I'll serve the church because I've just begun here, and even though I'm the most powerful by my innate talents or whatever, I have a lot to learn. That's not hard, and it's not even that much humility. He still gets all the magic powers, and he gets to fight evil. Or if he had approached Dormammu not knowing he'd won. His first line to Dormammu is said with the certainty that he already has won. And that means that every time he dies, it doesn't matter. He knows he won. He is just waiting for the sweet day that his winning becomes manifest. So just bringing the humility home in any way would have saved it, I think, in a big way. It wouldn't have addressed the casting issue, but it would have helped a big structural problem.
Even if they just said, hey, this takes place over 20 years.
And he doesn't know if he'll ever or even if going into it, someone was like, are you sure that'll work? And he's like, no, I'm not sure. I'm just trying it. That would change it for me.
Even that shows a little awareness.
Like he's a little bit of a Moses figure, right? Except for
if Moses knew he was... Well, Moses is pretty cocky. Yeah.
Yeah, Moses started out as Prince of Egypt.
I know. And then he's like, I have God in me, dude. Do not fuck with me. I'm Moses.
But what's interesting, he murders a person.
Right.
Because he decides he's the arbiter of justice, which he's not. And then he's chased out of the country. And then the only reason that he becomes this sort of figure of humility is because he spends 40 years being a shepherd nobody. Like, that's an
Right.
important part of that story, and we don't have the 40 years in the wilderness piece, which
the
is essential
The
to
equivalent
humility.
here is that they send Doctor Strange to freeze on a Nepalese mountaintop for 3.5 minutes.
Right. It's like, okay. Yeah. I mean, again, that just suggests, like, hey, like, we're going to do the form of humility, the form of structure without the substance of it. And that's really the problem here, you know?
And that's the magic trick, is being flashy and doing the form of being a good guy while secretly disenfranchising people. And I lay that problem in America entirely at the feet of Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah. How dare you?
His house alone offended me. It was like
Well,
made
he's so
of fucking crystal
quintessentially
slabs.
American as a person that I just think it, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We all
As
walk
Benedict
around.
goes, so goes America.
Yeah. I see it on the streets. The look in all the up and coming Benedict Cumberbatches of the next generation.
In Seattle, in Portland, everywhere,
in
the
Seattle,
Cumberbatch
in
is
Portland,
in their eyes.
Baltimore. Yeah. Yeah. It's but that all aside, this theory, I'm surprised that I've known you this long and like you didn't
drop
tell
it
me
on
about
ya?
this
Yeah.
theory. Cause this
I was honestly
Lives.
saving
this
it
is
for a Cracked article, but it doesn't look like that's going to pan out. I gave up.
well, what's crazy to me is I didn't see it myself. Because I rewatched it for this podcast, and when I watched it, I was just like, yeah, he's gonna shit on the fact that this sucks. This movie sucks. Because when I watched it, I was like, yeah, it's trite.
It's trite.
It's absolute
It's executed
pulp.
well in the Marvel way, where I still think the lines that they wanted to be funny are funny. Like it's what Adam said. It's not that they don't know what they're doing. It's that they abdicated everything except the one thing they know they're doing, and they didn't realize you're supposed to build the whole thing.
You can't.
I didn't
There's no
expect-
substitute for actual emotional work.
Or
There's just
actual
no
resonance
substitute.
that is true.
Right.
Yeah.
But like,
I didn't expect that it would turn into a thing where it's like the fact that it is trite is indicative of a harrowing system that persists.
The triteness is how they get us to swallow the pill. Yeah.
It goes down good.
I
man.
guess, but also like it tells you that ultimately white supremacy is not about being persuasive. It's about being unconscious.
It's
You know what
about
I mean?
not, because we're already in the boat of imbalance. It's about not taking action to right the
Right.
ship, because we're
Correct.
already in a crooked ship. Yeah.
Right, and that's the thing is right, and so that's the thing is when you go to a movie to have your intellect or your emotions challenged, right? Which is, I hope, what a movie would do. Any movie, I would hope it would do that. The best ones are the ones that are persuasive from a place you don't have. You know what I mean? Like a place you're not from. Like I know a lot of people think that I want to go to a movie because I want to be comforted, right? I want to have movies tell me what I already think. And I strongly feel that no, movies, the best movies are the ones that they know how to connect to the way you think enough that when they give you a different point of view, you find it compelling, and that's the exciting thing about it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's so
absolutely.
exciting about it.
Movies that ask questions, not give
Or
answers.
that make you
That's
feel
how I've
different
heard it.
than how you felt about an issue before you came in the theater.
Add one facet to your understanding of it.
Yeah.
Anything. Yeah.
Right. Again, we're not leaping into another dimension per se every time we watch a movie. I like that's not the kind of change I'm talking about. I'm talking about like you walk out of a movie like Moonlight and you're like, wow, like I just never thought through these 5 different scenarios that it would be like for a young gay black man.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or what? And you just you're just watching the movie. You're just experiencing the emotions. It's recognizably human, but it's rendered in such an intimate way that when you reflect on it 5 minutes after you walk out of the movie, you're like, wow. I just think a little differently about those issues than I did, or have a different emotional sensibility.
Adam, are you saying that Doctor Strange is because we're having this conversation, Doctor Strange is unintentionally a great film?
No, Abe. No. Abe, no.
Abe,
I
you've missed the
appreciate
point
that you
entirely.
Because it's.
I appreciate
it
you tried to trap me in this supremacy trap that you just
nice
laid out, Abe.
Nice bus you tried to throw me under, but no.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
No,
that.
you're
I'm
implying it,
no
just
throwing
like
of
Dr.
buses.
Strange is implying white people should stay in charge. I know what you're doing, Abe.
I'm just wondering thoughts
I'm just
out
thinking
loud.
my thoughts.
I'm just tinkering with little discs of time. That's all I'm doing.
That's right.
Hey, man, you do you. You do you, man.
I'm just polishing my cape and signet ring.
No. What you're saying, yeah.
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 Yep.
Throw that all away. What a theory, man.
Yeah, I like the idea of occasionally the show's an alternate
know.
reading that tells the underlying beliefs
Yes,
and feelings of a filmmaker.
that's-
I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Not always,
Yeah.
but some movies.
God, now I just want to watch Into the Spider-Verse.
Me
I
too,
know what I'm
apparently,
doing
yeah.
tonight.
It's
I need to
really,
watch that.
really good.
I've heard that before. It just never was the right night at the right time. et
It's
cetera, et
not
cetera.
as much as I love Spider-Man, the character, and have since I was a little kid. The Marvel movies really don't excite me. I don't get excited to go to them or see them. I see them out of obligation, and I watch them with a glaze over my face, and then I detachedly judge whether I thought it was a competent one or not. Because to me, even the best ones just fall in the range of very competent, but like not
Yeah.
moving or anything. So
No.
I
to
think that's
go
my
to
problem with it.
Spider-Verse and actually be moved by a Spider-Man story was a unique experience. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that makes me think like which superhero movies are the ones that emotionally are moving.
Darkman
that's
got
not-
me, but I was very young.
Which one?
Darkman, the Sam Raimi one.
Darkman?
where the guy gets
Darkman,
his
I
face
see.
burned in acid.
Yeah. Yeah. Even the Batmans are not necessarily moving the way
The
you hoped they
Nolans?
would be. Well, I like them.
I like him
the
quite
first
a bit,
two-
but he's
the
a
first
detached
two.
kind of guy, yeah.
That's the thing about Nolan is that he's more conceptual than he is emotional.
Yeah, it's usually, yeah, it's like, in The Prestige, it's him literally saying, like, I have suffered for 10 years. And you're like, show me that. Don't just, whatever.
Well,
he phones
he's,
in the emotional components.
So he's like Kubrick without the menace. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
that's
Kubrick has a
exactly
menacing
right.
quality that
Yeah.
makes him really interesting. Like Nolan's like, I'm going to take that menace away and I'm just going to instead replace it with high concept and like that's it. And but the rest of it's Kubrick.
Hal has the ability to shame you with every shot. Like when I watch a Kubrick film, I feel like the movie's telling me, don't try to understand the movie. You're not smart enough. Don't worry about it.
It is very. His movies are condescending.
Yes, he has a
they are-
condescending eye.
No, he does. That's accurate, I would argue. But like, see, I think Kubrick is an interesting artist because he is doing high art work and he is pushing our envelope. But he's one of the only people we've allowed to do movies that are like, I just make you uncomfortable. Like I'm like a prophet. Like that's my job as a filmmaker, is like to be a prophet. I poke at a thing you don't like and I push you at a place you don't want to be pushed, and like that's my artistic experience.
Yeah.
Very few people get to do that. He's one of the only ones. I
Lynch
can
and
think
Von
of.
Trier and him, I think.
But
Yeah.
even Lynch, it's like fun.
Lynch is
you know,
fun.
like-
Von Trier is legitimately hates the audience.
Yeah,
I
he's
think
a
he's one of the
maniac.
few.
Yeah.
He's a legit maniac. It's true. Lynch is truly a weirdo, but he's not that I don't actually find his stuff menacing, even when it's very
No.
dark. He's a playful weirdo.
It's like Freudian. It's like
just
like
a
dark
weirdo.
in
He's
like
just legit
a,
weird.
Yeah, he
Just
is weird.
weird, man.
Have
love
you
him.
listened to his records? Have you
Yeah, of
listened to his
course.
albums?
Clown Time.
Oh, Crazy Clown
Crazy
Time.
Clown Time.
Pop that on at the end of this
We used to
podcast,
blast
audience.
that under the cigarette tree at Cracks.
Yeah, we did. I used to put that shit on, Abe.
Crazy
Remember
Clown
that?
Time.
Crazy Clown Time, Abe.
I don't know.
Wah.
I don't fucking
We
have
did
time
it.
for David
Hey,
What's
Lynch,
your
we-
man.
weather for today?
Mommy.
You fucking old timey baseball announcer. Get the
He
fuck
is an
out
old
of
timey
here.
baseball announcer. That's exactly what he is.
Quinoa, and he walks up
He's on
to the
base.
and he swings.
He misses,
like,
and
he's
he
just like a
doesn't miss at the same time.
And it's a shot to left field. I don't know. But like, yeah, Kubrick. What you're saying about Kubrick is true.
It's true, Brick.
I
Yeah, he's cruel. He's got a cruel
I think a
point
lot
of
of
view.
that comes from, like, I think there's a lot more artists than you guys are giving credit to that type of thought, or like the idea of, like, I guess what you called prophetic artists, or artists that are allowed to be in that regard, because that's all of cinema verite. Like, that's all
Verite.
of
Herzog
that's
carries
Vinderberg,
himself
Dogma
as a
95.
prophet, yeah.
But see, like,
Lars von Trier is a
I'm
great
going to
example.
define the word prophet as I'm using it here. I don't, just so that people don't,
Sure.
like, argue, like, word dissect me. I hate that. It bothers me. So, like, what I mean by that
Okay.
is, like, it's like the traditional role of the prophet, right? The role of the prophet in mythological terms is to come and point out the mistake the society is making and tell them you must fix it. Like, that's the role of the prophet, right? And so, and Kubrick sort of,
Right.
as an artist, does that, right?
I see.
He like
So would you say
like,
Michael Moore casts himself in that role?
Michael Moore
in his
wants to
basic
be
way?
that. He wants to be that as a documentary. He's a social activist, but he's not. I would say he's not doing it like in an artistic way, the way that Kubrick is.
He does it without mystery or flair. He's kind of a blunt instrument, but yeah.
I mean, a lot of documentarians are
blunt.
doing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and are doing the prophet thing, like the role of it. But like, we don't usually allow it from like fiction filmmakers.
I see.
Not enough, at least. Like I would say,
But Get
Mad
Out
Men.
got through, and that was a huge deal
Yes.
that it got through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. Mad Men is kind of like
Yeah.
that. The Sopranos is kind of
Yeah.
one of those shit like that.
The Wire.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, The Wire for sure.
Iconoclasm films will always, like, that's their point, right? They're attacking an institution or belief or religion, whatever, that is culturally shared, and the dismantling and deconstruction of which in front of your eyes is a lot of what motivates art, right?
I
Yeah.
mean, that's what you want art to be. I would argue that film has a hard time achieving that because it's about
I mean, if
generating
you-
revenue. But again, there are exceptions.
Right. You're either you're propaganda either way,
Well,
right?
but there's some exceptions. Like I would say, like the movie Network, for instance, is a great example of managing to overachieve enough to be a prophetic work. I mean, and that's a really prophetic work, by the way. Have you
Oh
seen
my
that
God.
movie?
Yeah,
Oh
he
my
literally,
God.
well,
No,
he
it's-
yells at you what to do. He's like, do this, get upset, open your window, go to the window. It's as prophety as you could
It's
get.
so good. And then also when the God figure appears, it's just awesome.
Yeah.
It's an amazing movie.
I don't think this movie succeeded for me, but Joker is trying to do that.
I think Joker's trying to prescribe, like, it's not trying to
Yeah.
solve things. It's trying to describe what is happening.
It's trying to describe something that it thinks is a very clear, cohesive problem.
Yes.
I just think it gets a lot of the details of that problem wrong and it exaggerates them in weird ways.
I think Joker is the
Correct.
ultimate. We expected so little from this movie, and it way overachieved.
Right. Well, because people who struggle with mental trauma actually getting healed is a huge issue. I just don't
Right.
think Joker is the smart movie about it, for my money.
No,
Yeah.
it's just it's like fairly mediocre. But like, I guess what I was trying to is that's a great example, because I was trying to suss out the difference between an iconoclast and a portrayer of a society. Like one of your boys, Boonwell.
Oh, my boy.
Adam, is
Oh my
one
God,
of
I
your
love him.
boys,
He's in the Crazy Clown
love
Time.
to do that.
Yeah.
Where he just present, like, here is a
Right.
dinner.
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies.
And then it becomes, for you, the audience member, or Haneke is another great
Yeah.
example. Here's just a thing that's happening. And then what your job is play this kind of, like, remember those highlights books where you're supposed to look at one image and then the other, and it's like try to diagnose which is the wrong thing. What are those calls?
Well, I don't think they have an official name.
Oh, that shoe
You just
isn't
compare
in
pictures
that.
and look for differences.
that-
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like sometimes films do that, and they say, like, do you see what the problem is with this family? You know, like Vinderberg's The Celebration, if you guys have seen
love
that.
that movie.
I watched it
Love
last
that
night.
movie. Ugh.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
It's
So you know.
fantastic movie.
Festin?
Yeah,
yeah,
Festin.
yeah.
That's
the
correct.
one. Yeah, I watched it last
Festin,
night.
yeah. that's trying to show you, it's presenting you with like, here's a situation. Do you see how it's going to go bad?
Can you spot
right?
what's wrong with this
There's
family
a difference
that seems
between,
fine? Yeah.
Right. So portrayal of just average life and then it all goes poorly is something that's more like Coen brothers do that as well. There's a lot of filmmakers who do that. Kubrick, I think, is doing a lot more of the, here is what is wrong. Let me prove it to you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're right about that. Like, when you watch 2001 A Space Odyssey, it starts with the premise, essentially, of, like, I'm going to teach you, like, deep innate what you are. Basically, 2001 A Space Odyssey is ultimately like a this is what you are. That's the movie. And it spends the entire time showing that. And that's unusual. That's part of what makes it so good, is that, like, there aren't a lot of movies that are like that. I think sometimes Yorgos tries to do that. The Lobster guy and Dogtooth.
I
Anyway,
love Lobster.
That's my
Dave hates
theory
it.
about Doctor Strange.
Yeah, sorry.
You guys are like burning through a season's worth of theses that you could build into whole episodes. You realize
No, we
that,
can't.
right?
No, we're not. We're not because we don't deal with high art movies on this podcast. We deal with like.
Oh, so you
we
wouldn't
deal with-
cover Yorgos? I'm like, don't
No, I
spill
would
your
never
fucking
cover him.
Yorgos theory, dude.
That's a whole different podcast for Elvis Mitchell and the
I think the favorite is the favorite not mainstream enough to cover on this show.
The favorite was up for Academy
That's,
Awards. I think that's one of the big delineators. Is it up
yeah.
for
Oh, I'm
Academy
lucky it was
Awards?
Doctor Strange then, because I didn't know that rule. I just happened to pick a movie that worked.
We would have told you
Yeah.
if you'd have said that.
Like,
We'd be like,
oh, we
can't
would
do
have
that.
shamed you. Don't worry.
Yeah, get off the genius couch.
No.
Get right off the genius couch.
No, you're revealing something, Swaim, that I also don't know what this show is anymore.
What are you talking
Like,
about?
not in
It's
a bad
very
way.
clear to me what the
not in
show
a bad
is.
way. Not in a bad way. I'm just saying, like, I
Oh.
don't know, because every time I'm like, well, it's an Academy Award, so, you know, like, I've used that
Yeah.
a few times to veto or self-veto ideas for topics on this podcast. But then I'll also be like, in the same moment, be like, yeah, but
Right.
fuck the Academy, though. Like,
Right,
what do
right.
they think?
But
that
also,
doesn't matter.
it's about
But it's just, I think
perceived.
it's mainstreamish enough. It's got to be mainstreamy.
It's got to be
zeitgeisty,
perceived as not a high art movie. I
Right,
think is part of
okay.
it. The point where Abe and I got into a 2-hour discussion, and it was over the movie Hook. I want the audience to hear this because this is my favorite thing that's happened on this podcast. Hook became like the litmus test that we argued about for a good 2 hours. Of like, wait a minute, is Hook was made by Spielberg? And it was up for a couple Academy Awards. Is this considered a high art movie? Like, would we not cover it? And I was like, dude, it's not that good. It's not as good of a movie as you think it is. And he was like, people think that though. And we had this whole fucking thing about it. And we settled on Hook was the
Yeah, we
line.
did.
So if you cross the Hook threshold, then you can't be in this on this podcast.
People, well, I don't want to bring it up.
It's the
Or
Hook
I don't want to
test.
stir it up. Yeah. But
Yeah.
people do think that, though, would be my take.
Yeah, I knew you guys would agree. Like, whenever you guys agree, it's like, oh yeah,
Of
the
course
the
they
one
do.
opinion got
Oh, the
reinforced.
Bobbsey
I got
twins
it.
agree? All right.
Right. Congratulations. Hope you guys solved a murder.
I'm so sad
We're the goddamn Hardy
Adam.
Boys.
It must be so
And
hard
it's funny
being
because
wrong.
Adam, I would say you and I love each other just as much, and we delight
Oh, yeah.
in how we disagree on every single thing.
We format all the shows that I'm on basically to
around disagreement?
enhance the fact that I'm going to disagree with people.
Yep.
That's like
You're our one
that's my
person.
magic power.
You're our friend who's willing to be confrontational. We need you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, definitely portray
Or
it that
Dave.
way, as if
Yeah.
we're all cowards. Definitely do that.
I would say I very clearly know what this show is, and the last half hour has not been an episode of this show.
No, but I at this point,
No.
I got to tell you guys, we're only an hour and a half in. This is like 1/3 of a podcast with Dave. So, like, to me, I'm just getting ramped up. Like, we could go on for hours.
Yeah,
I
don't
just
even-
did a charity stream for
I don't
6
even-
hours directly preceding this, so I have to go.
Well, I apologize.
Well, he just comes in with
It's
his
true.
big theories and then leaves.
And then skates out
Talk
of here.
about iconoclast.
Yeah.
Hey, do you guys hear my puppy screaming?
Dude, that dog is
Oh, good.
amazing.
No.
That dog is amazing.
That dog is so cute. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I
It's
fucking
beautiful.
hate
You gotta
you.
meet him.
I want to.
Yeah, he's a beautiful dog.
I want
You
to
wanna
kill
kill
it.
it.
It's so fucking
screams so
cute.
loud, though.
It's so cute.
I do want to kiss him right in
I
the forehead.
know,
Yep.
I do want to kiss his little forehead.
He'll kiss you back.
know.
He loves it.
Oh,
He's a good little boy.
it's
Rolly
too
boy.
much. It's too much.
Dude, I gotta tell you, Abe, I always felt like you should have a dog, Abe. I feel like
I
you're
think
missing
so
a dog
too,
in your life.
yeah. Whereas
Like a little
Adam,
French bulldog.
you could get or not get a dog. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. I can be a full thing myself.
Right.
I don't need a
Abe
dog to
is
complete
missing
it.
pieces that he needs a
Yeah,
dog.
Abe is broken.
I'm as an individual. I'm
You're dogless.
incomplete. Is that
Yeah,
what
you're
you guys are
dogless.
saying?
If you feel that hole, it's
Well, you know how you always carry
Yeah.
that leash around and you just let it drag sadly behind you? It just seems weird,
it's
dude.
true.
You know how you have like
It's
pounds
not
of rotting
weird.
food in your apartment that are
You know how
not being eaten?
you're always slopping a can of food on the floor in the corner and then you just leave it there?
It's not.
Piles up.
It's not weird. It's a thing. I grew up with it. It's how it works. It's how I eat.
But seriously, a French bulldog
right.
named Edward would finish your whole deal.
Sure.
I agree, except its
Finish it
name
right
should
up.
be Sam Porter Bridges.
That's also an excellent dog name. I
For
like that.
specifically a French bulldog, I think it's a good, yeah. You put a little backpack on it with way too much shit on it.
French bulldogs need the most long names you can imagine. Like however many you can put on there,
Yeah.
that's how many it needs.
Little Lord Fauntleroy.
Yes, Lord Bullingtonsworth the third.
That's the bulldog bit for sure.
I just made my D&D character, and I decided that one of my backstory is I worked for a man named Sir Horsepower.
Nice.
I want to name a dog
Oh,
Sir Horsepower now.
Nice.
Sir Horsepower, yeah. But that's
Well, we did it.
That's all I
we
got.
did it. Hey,
Yeah, we did it. What a theory. Thank you for stopping by,
You guys
man.
just want to talk about life? What do you what do you want to do?
well, he's gotta go. He's gotta go. Apparently,
I
so
understand.
I'm
I got a
reading the room a
screaming
little
puppy.
bit.
You really can't
But-
hear that? Let me hold the mic up to the room.
No, I can hear it. I just wanted to do
Oh,
this
okay.
bit.
No, I
Yeah,
got to
bring
take
the
the
puppy.
body out.
Terrible.
I can't hear it. Yeah, I can't hear it. Maybe we'll hear it on your end with
You
your
might
audio.
just
but
take
I
the
can't
last
hear
5
it.
minutes. It won't be a big deal.
What the fuck are we talking about? All right, go to Twitter and look at
Yeah.
Swaim's
Yeah, it's
dog.
beautiful.
That's it.
If you
Fully
enjoyed
lost
this
track of
show,
what we were talking about. Oh, Adam's going to save us.
if you enjoyed this dog, you can find it on twitter.com
That's
/
true.
Michael Swaim Corp, where pictures of it will be available.
That's
No,
not
but if
even
you
the right
enjoyed this,
URL.
Yeah, I forgot. I don't know. I fucked it up. But anyway, if you liked this show and or would like to ever see that dog again, feel free to check out our patreon.com / small beans, where you can contribute to the Small Beans Network. We would love to take a couple of bucks if you got them to spare, or if you liked it enough that you'd like to suggest it to some of your friends, feel free to rate it on iTunes. That does help us out. Abe, anything else we should plug while we're here?
We sometimes stream video games and chats at twitch.tv/oneupsmanship. These guys, not me, but these guys do their podcast and sometimes stream there from time to
On
time.
occasion,
and,
yeah.
you know, we'll talk video games or just have a
Yeah.
good time and have some laughs usually. So there's that as well.
I just streamed Psychonauts VR. It
I
was
can't
fun.
think of anything else. Yeah, I
Psychonauts
saw
2 is
that.
coming out any
That's-
minute now,
Oh,
right?
no, I can't wait.
Dude.
Yeah, a couple weeks, but yeah, soon.
Ooh.
Very exciting.
I am gonna finish.
Heck yeah.
I'm making this commitment now to the audience at hour 1:33. I will finish Psychonauts, and I will finish at some point Final Fantasy VII Remake, so that we can get
Oh,
both
great.
of those.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
lists.
That'll be great.
I will get that done.
Which
Yes.
of our shows is this again? I forget.
This is Directorpiece
Oh, yeah,
Theater.
that's right.
This is
There we go.
Directorpiece Theater,
We've come full circle.
where we rate directors.
Where we rate the pit.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. What's going on? We
What
gotta get
dinosaur
out of
real
here.
good?
What a podcast.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.